Peace, beautiful beings, and welcome back to Ascension Books and Conversations. I know I have been gone for so long. I was like looking at the last post that I had, and I was like, oh my gosh, that much time has already passed. So here I am. I'm back. Um, I do want to continue reading this book alongside with you all. I just have definitely been going through a lot of transitions during this time. If you are subscribed to me already, you might already know that I've been dealing with the passing of my son, my cat, my child, Ollie, and it was pretty sad situation, to be honest. It was pretty traumatic of a time, and it all happened so fast. And so these last few weeks, I've just kind of been transmuting that energy and trying to just keep pushing forward. And so one of the things that kept calling back to me was this reading. So that's why I'm here with you today. And if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. We have here not only book readings that you usually don't see in a lot of spiritual spaces, but we also I also share yoga practices, some sound healing, and sometimes just some vlogs sharing my insights in life. So yeah, I did want to share though that something I am learning through this time of grief. This rising, I was in a phone call and shared what had happened, and it was, shared that sometimes, especially in the Black community, we tend to look at grief or loss as something very negative. And in reality, she had brought up that even in places like New Orleans, a lot of people will actually celebrate and give thanks to the life of that being, and be happy in their transition. And so it's really been calling me to go back to what I know about just us as spiritual beings and the knowledge that I've been given, and how to use this energy, this very unfortunate and unexpected energy that so many of us go through, how to use it to really fuel us to move forward rather than be stagnant and stuck in grief. So yeah, that's something I've learned recently, and I'm still exercising. And if you have any insights about how you've dealt with grief, or how you've just progressed after a time of loss, definitely would love to hear how you got through that. But while we're here, I did want to get into the reading, and I don't think I have a lot of time, to be honest, so we'll see how far we get through. If this is your first time, welcome. The book that we're reading is called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ by Levi H. Dowling. And I put the PDF link in the description box below here so that you can follow along. This book is from Levi's traveling through the Akashic Records and learning about Jesus' life, the parts of the Bible, the King James Bible, that we deem to be missing or just unwritten. So yeah, if it resonates with you, I would love for you to follow along. And I also put in the description box all of the other chapters, so that you can follow at your convenience and reflect in your own time. But I always love to hear revelations that you have, insights that you have while reading. So please don't hesitate to share those in the comments either. So we'll go ahead and get started. I believe we finished on chapter 71. My computer's going pretty slow, and so forgive me if it starts to mess up when I scroll, but let me pull up the chapter. Just bear with me for 1 sec, and maybe you can pull it up too and just see where you're at. Okay, I'm going real slow. Sorry, y'all. Okay, almost there. Let's. Happy Wednesday. I'm reading this when it's Wednesday. I hope that your Wednesday is beautiful. Okay, found it. So we ended on chapter 71, and we're moving on to chapter 72, which is also a new section, and it is section 15, Samek, the first annual epic of the Christine ministry of Jesus. So the last few chapters we were going through, Jesus was just beginning his ministry. He was just beginning to teach, but he does have his disciples now. And so this is moving forward with him in Jerusalem during his ministry. Right. So chapter 72, Jesus in Jerusalem drives the merchants out of the temple. The priests resent, and he defends himself from the standpoint of a loyal Jew. He speaks to the people. The Jewish Paschal feast time came, and Jesus left his mother in Capernaum and journeyed to Jerusalem. So Mary was with him the previous time, but now he is traveling alone, or traveling without her. Sorry, that's not part of the book. Let me just read. The Jewish Paschal feast time came, and Jesus left his mother in Capernaum and journeyed to Jerusalem. And he abode with one, a Sadducee, whose name was Jude. And when he reached the temple courts, the multitudes were there to see the prophet whom the people thought had come to break the yoke of Rome, restore the kingdom of the Jews, and rule on David's throne. And when the people saw him come, they said, "All hail, behold the king." But Jesus answered not. He saw the money changers in the house of God, and he was grieved. The courts had been converted into marts of trade, and men were selling lambs and doves for offerings and sacrifice. And Jesus called the priests and said, "Behold, for paltry gain you have sold out the temple of the Lord. This house ordained for prayer is now a den of thieves. Can good and evil dwell together in the courts of God? I tell you, no." And then he made a scourge of cords and drove the merchants out. He overturned their boards and threw their money on the floor. He opened up the cages of the captive birds and cut the cords that bound the lambs and set them free. Yeah. The priests and scribes rushed out and would have done him harm, but they were driven back. The common people stood in his defense. And then the ruler said, "Who is this Jesus you call king?" The people said, "He is the Christ of whom our prophets wrote. He is the king who will deliver Israel." The ruler said to Jesus, "Man, if you be king or Christ, then show us signs. Who gave you right to drive these merchants out?" And Jesus said, "There is no loyal Jew who would not give his life to save this temple from disgrace. In this I acted simply as a loyal Jew, and you yourselves will bear me witness to this truth. The signs of my messiahship will follow me in words and deeds. And you may tear the temple down, and you will tear it down. And in 3 days it will be built again, more glorious than before." Now Jesus meant that they might take his life, tear down his body, temple of the holy breath, and he would rise again. The Jews knew not the meaning of his words. They laughed his claims to scorn. They said, "A multitude of men were 46 years in building up this house. And this young stranger claims that he will build it up in 60 hours. His words are idle, and his claims are not." And then they took the scourge with which he drove the merchants out, and would have driven him away. But Philo, who had come from Egypt to attend the feast, stood forth and said, "You men of Israel, hear. This man is more than man. Take heed to what you do. I have myself heard Jesus speak, and all the winds were still. And I have seen him touch the sick, and they were healed. He stands a sage above the sages of the world. And you will see his star arise, and it will grow until it is the full-orbed Sun of Righteousness. Do not be hasty, men. Just wait, and you will have the proofs of his messiahship." And then the priest laid down the scourge, and Jesus said, Prepare, O Israel, prepare to meet your king. But you can never see the king while you press sin as such a precious idol to your hearts. The king is God. The pure in heart alone can see the face of God and live. And then the priests cried out, "This fellow claims to be the God. Is not this sacrilege? Away with him." But Jesus said, "No man has ever heard me say, 'I am a king.' Our Father God is king. With every loyal Jew, I worship God. I am the candle of the Lord aflame to light the way. And while you have the light, walk in the light." Chapter 72. So in this chapter, there's a lot of similarities to the King James Version. We've noticed within these last few chapters, once Jesus began his ministry, that there's a lot of parallels to the King James and this book, but there are a few sentences that get brought on with it that share more of what Jesus was feeling at the time, and also more of what he already knew his purpose to be while being here. So going back to the last few verses, Jesus says in verse 27, he says, "Prepare to meet your king, but you can never see the king while you press sin as such a precious idol to your hearts." And at that time, he's definitely talking about the Jewish people who were in the temples in Jerusalem, and the leaders who were turning this house of only prayer into a house of commodifying things, materials. And he was saying that if you live in this way and you cling to these things rather than clinging to God, you're going to not be able to ever experience God. And people are saying that he's, pretty much sacrilegious and he needs to go. And he said, "I never claimed that I'm a king." And that's something he actually stood by, like throughout his whole ministry. Like no matter what people called him, he did call himself the Messiah, but did he call himself the Messiah? Well, okay. Well, at least in regards to the king, the term king, he never used that for himself. He was like, "You call me this, like y'all can call me whatever you want to call me," pretty much. But he never said, "I am king." He always referred back to source. And in the last verse, he says, "I am the candle of the Lord aflame to light the way. And while you have the light, walk in the light." So he's sharing his full on purpose is to light the way for us to live more Christ-like and to stray away from the ways of sin. And he's that example for us. And just like the other Jews, he worships God as well. And so he's really, really claiming his equality, but also his knowing of why he's there here on earth at this time to light the way. So yeah, moving on. Chapter 73. Jesus again visits the temple and is favorably received by the people. Tells the parable of a king and his sons, defines messiahship. Okay, here we go. Next day, the multitudes were surging through the temple courts, intent on hearing Jesus speak. And when he came, the people said, "All hail, behold the king." And Jesus spoke a parable. He said, "A king had vast domains. His people all were kin and lived in peace. Now, after many years, the king said to his people, 'Take these lands and all I have, enhance their values, rule yourselves, and live in peace.' And then the people formed their states, selected governors and petty kings. But pride, ambition, selfish greed, and base ingratitude grew fast, and kings began to war. They wrote in all their statute books that might is right, And then the strong destroyed the weak, and chaos reigned through all the vast domain. A long time passed, and then the king looked down on his domain. He saw his people in their cruel wars. He saw them sick and sore distressed. He saw the strong enslave the weak. And then he said, "What shall I do? Shall I send forth a scourge? Shall I destroy my people all?" And then his heart was stirred with pity, and he said, "I will not send a scourge. I will send forth my only son, heir to the throne, to teach the people love and peace and righteousness." He sent his son. The people scorned him and maltreated him and nailed him to a cross. He was entombed, but death was far too weak to hold the prince, and he arose. He took a form man could not kill. And then he went again to teach the people love and peace and righteousness. And thus God deals with men. Huh. Huh. I like that. A lawyer came and asked, "What does Messiah mean? And who has right to make Messiah of a man?" And Jesus said, "Messiah is one sent from God to seek and save the lost. Messiahs are not made by men. And first of every age, Messiah comes to light the way, to heal up broken hearts, to set the prisoners free. Messiah and the Christ are one. Because a man claims to be Christ is not a sign that he is Christ. A man may cause the streams to flow from flinty rocks, may bring storms at will, may stay tempestuous winds, may heal the sick and raise the dead, and not be sent from God. All nature is subservient to the will of man, and evil men, as well as good, have all the powers of mind and may control the elements. The head gives not the proof of true messiahship. For man by means of intellect can never know of God, nor bring himself to walk in light. Messiah lives not in the head, but in the heart, the seat of mercy and of love. Messiah never works for selfish gains. He stands above the carnal self. His words and deeds are for the universal good. Messiah never tries to be a king, to wear a crown and sit upon an earthly throne. The king is earthy of the earth. Messiah is the man from heaven. And then the lawyer asked, "Why do you pose as king?" And Jesus said, "No man has ever heard me say that I am king. I could not sit in Caesar's place and be the Christ. Give unto Caesar what belongs to him. Give unto God the treasures of your heart." Chapter 73. I really like that chapter. And I say this like every video. So yeah. But first off, that verse is beautiful. And if you've read the Bible, then you've definitely heard the verse before. Give unto Caesar what belongs to him. Give unto God the treasures of your heart. And that is something that a lot of churches do use when it comes to, what's the term? I already forgot. I haven't been to church in a while, y'all. When you're giving your money, what is the term? Y'all tell me, because it's not going to come to me right now. But you know what I'm talking about. And, you know, they say you're supposed to give your money because you're supposed to continue to give give the earthly things what they're intended for. So at that time, Caesar did have taxes. Caesar did, take people's money. And unfortunately, that is what we were choosing to succumb to at that time in terms of government or rulership. And I only say it in that way because we create our reality as a collective. And so at that time, the collective allowed that system. That's the system that had been created. And so Jesus says, give Caesar what is due Caesar. You subscribe to these taxes, you give him these taxes. You subscribe to this lifestyle, you give him this lifestyle. But don't expect the same thing to be that type of exchange when it comes to dealing with God or Christ or the Messiah, because God wants the treasures of your heart, and that has nothing to do with material. It has everything to do with like your intent, your feelings, your, you know, your, his description here being the verse 22, the seat of mercy and love is in your heart, and you never work towards selfish gain. And unfortunately, that's something that at this time is what was being brought up and bred in the human evolution was this learned behavior of greed, of power, of war. You know, war was created, and that came from those feelings. And so just like how love and mercy can create something, that selfishness and power and greed led to chaos. And so Jesus is saying that he's like, I came here as a Messiah to show the opposite of that, because clearly it's not present in this collective consciousness right now. Clearly right now, all y'all can see is greed and selfishness, chaos. And so I do think that also still plays on the idea of the second coming of Christ, of Jesus, is not a physical being, but it has everything to do with our physical being. We have a physical vessel, and we were given that light to light our way into a new way of living. So there's that. That's how I feel about that. Okay, we're going to move on because I don't have a lot of time. Right, I'll just do one more chapter. If you're still here, thanks for sticking around. Hope you're getting some insight. All right, chapter 74. Jesus heals on the Sabbath, and yeah, hold on. Sorry, just that's what I'm talking about. I have no time. But okay, last one. Chapter 74. Jesus heals on the Sabbath and is censored by the Pharisees. Restores a drowned child, rescues a wounded dog, cares for a homeless child, speaks on the law of kindness. It was the Sabbath day, and Jesus stood among the surging masses of the people in the temple courts and sacred halls. The blind, the deaf, the dumb, and those obsessed were there, and Jesus spoke the word, and they were healed. On some he laid his hands, and they were healed. To others he just spoke the word, and they were full restored to health. But others had to go and wash in certain pools, and others he anointed with the holy oil. A doctor asked him why he healed in diverse ways, and he replied, "Disease is discord in the human form, and discords are produced in many ways. The body is a harpsichord. Sometimes the strings are too relaxed, and then inharmony results. Sometimes we find the strings too tense, and then another form of discord is induced. Disease is many-formed, and there are many ways to cure, to tune anew the mystic harpsichord." Now, when the Pharisees were told that Jesus healed the people on the Sabbath day, they were enraged, and they commanded him to quit the place. But Jesus said, was man designed to fit the Sabbath, or was the Sabbath day designed to fit the man? If you had fallen in a pit, and lo, the Sabbath day had come, and I had passed your way, would you cry out, "Let me alone. It is a sin to help me on the Sabbath day. I'll swelter in this filth until another day"? You Pharisees, you hypocrites, you know you would be glad to have my help upon the Sabbath day or any other day. These people all have fallen into pits, and they are calling loud for me to help them out. And man and God would curse me should I pass along and heed them not. And then the Pharisees returned to say their prayers and cursed the man of God because he heeded not their words. Now in the evening, Jesus stood beside a pool. A playful child had fallen in, and it was drowned, and friends were bearing it away. But Jesus called the carriers to stop, and then he stretched himself upon the lifeless form and breathed into his mouth. It breathed into its mouth the breath of life. And then he called aloud onto the soul that had gone out, and it returned. The child revived and lived. And Jesus saw a wounded dog. It could not move. It lay beside the way and groaned with pain. He took it in his arms and bore it to the home where he abode. He poured the healing oil into the wounds. He cared for it as though it were a child till it was strong and well. And Jesus saw a little boy who had no home, and he was hungry. When he called for bread, the people turned away. And Jesus took the child and gave him bread. He wrapped him in his own warm coat and found for him a home. To those who followed him, the master said, if man would gain again his lost estate, he must respect the brotherhood of life. Whoever is not kind to every form of life, to man, to beast, to bird, and creeping thing, cannot expect the blessings of the Holy One. For as we give, so God will give to us. Chapter 74. You know, I love leaving it at one of Jesus's best vegan advocacy verses up in here. You know, I love that. So yeah, pretty much be loving to all beings. One thing that did come to me though when I was reading this was, you know, we don't really know how many people were around during this time. Maybe you do. Maybe you have history that I don't. But sometimes I will read verses like this, and it makes me reevaluate how I move in the world. It makes me reevaluate those that I should help, especially when I live in a city filled with people that need help. Filled with people that need so many different forms of help, for there are so many different forms of discord in their life. And a long time, I would be the type of person to go out of my way to help people. That's how I was raised. I was raised Christian. And that moral value stuck with me for a long time. But when I moved out here, it started to shift my perspectives on, you know, the way other people were living their lives outside of mine. And I started to think to myself, hey, like, why should I give someone something who's not trying when I am? That's kind of the gist of the mind shift. And I honestly struggle with that in my own self to even have that revelation, because morally I know it's better for my heart to help people. And I feel better when I do. Not out of like pride, like, oh, I helped somebody and, you know, makes me feel good. No, it's more like knowing that I had an opportunity to offer something that I have and have been blessed with, you know what I mean? And being able to offer that to someone who may never have a chance to have that. And for me to prejudge somebody that I don't know just because of their circumstance is like so not me, but it's something I've grown into just living in this life, because it's so easy. Like there's so many people in the world, right? So sometimes it's almost like discouraging and deafening to try to help people, right? You feel like your impact is not making any impact. But the truth is that it is. Even if it is only one person in your whole life, that one person will feel the impact. And so this chapter helped me reevaluate those morals again. And yeah, of course, don't drain yourself in a sense of, you know, making decisions that are going to leave you in a worse state, but also giving with the knowledge the wisdom that you're actually never empty. You'll always be provided for. Source, God will always take care of you. And if you're pouring from a space of love and good intent and not for your own selfish gain, I'm pretty sure that you won't feel that drain. So, yeah, just wanted to end there. Thanks for tuning in if you did. Hopefully I'll see you again soon. I'm definitely making it my intention to keep consistent in the things that I've told myself I want to focus on. And y'all are definitely a part of that here in this YouTube community. And so I really look forward to getting to know y'all more. And yeah, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. Don't forget to read the other chapters if you haven't. And I send you so much love and so much peace. And yeah, see you next time.